Hello, it's Jay Fisher. Welcome to quality reporting for the Wisconsin IPA for 2025. We've updated some things based on what we learned in the 2024 data collection process and hopefully made things easier based on feedback we've received from a number of people. One of the things that's different is this year, everyone will be loading data into the Macromonitor portal and be able to see the results of what you loaded pretty close to real time. So let's pause here. We'll take a look and find out the specifics of what's different for you. So if you're reporting registry information, and what that means is you can't get data out of your EHR or you can't get data from a QCDR or another registry that you report to, then you'll be reporting up through the C3 Partners registry. And just as a reminder, that means you're going to have to be coding your own encounters through any one of a couple of methods that we can talk about with you one-on-one. So what the purpose of this video is once you've created that coded encounter file, how do you get it to the IPA? How do you get it into Macromonitor? And then how do you view the results? So I'm going to start with when you first log into Macromonitor, you're going to see a screen that's maybe a little different than it was last time. One of the things that will be here and that I think you're going to like is we've created a calendar widget where you can reach out if you're stuck on something, you want to create a meeting to talk about optimization or anything. You'll be able to click into this widget, select a time and date, and actually schedule a meeting with me or one of my colleagues. That meeting schedule will set up a Zoom call for both of us and put the invitation on your calendar as well as mine. So that's a good tool for keeping in touch um, with what's going on and asking and answering questions. So if you're a registry, you're going to be uploading data and you're going to be clicking, you're going to do that. You're going to start with a file that you create. And I'll show you where to get that file and what the format will look like. But you'll click on the bottom link. Right now it says encounter data. Sometime after the publication of this video, we're going to be changing this to say registry data. The important thing is it's the bottom link in the left-hand navigator. You click on that link and there'll be another link here that says encounter data. You'll click to upload a new file. And at this point, if you haven't created the file, we'll give you some help in how to go about creating file. But let's pretend for a moment that you've created the file. You create the file, put in the you'll upload the file into the system from on your desktop somewhere. There's one thing that we'd like you to do, and that is the name of the file that you upload should follow this format. The file name should have the actual TIN number. It should have the actual date. And then a text string. The text string can be anything you want. Call it 2025 first half data. The only constraints in this is whatever text string you use here, if you have no spaces in it, and make sure it's something that's going to be useful to you if you have to come back later and do some research. And then click submit, and the system will start to process. Once the system has processed, you'll see that file listed here on the encounter data. And once it'll have a status. Once the status says complete, you'll be able to click over here on the link that says quality, go to TIN CQM date details, and your file and your data will all show up here. Of course, this is a demo system and I don't have any content for this specific demo TIN. But and the values you should choose to make sure the system displays is just as it shows here in the system. It'll say registry and the select method will be system generated. And your quality measures that the system calculates for you will show up right here. Now, let's go to a slightly different topic. And the topic is back here. If you haven't yet created your file and you're looking for what that file should look like, what should be the content of that file, there's two places you can look. First, you can click on this link that says the encounter CSV format, and this will pop up a download, and the download will give you a blank CSV with nothing but the headers. So you'll be able to populate the data from your system into that file structure and just map everything to the headers that are in this demo layout. If you want to know a little bit more about the details of the file and what's involved in the individual fields, we've created a tool here. If you click on Admin and Public File, and there'll be several different file formats here. The one there are several different files that you can download that have information. The one that's going to be most interesting to you is the one that says Registry Data Load Template. I'm going to click on the file download link here, and then I'm going to click into the file. And when you get that downloaded file, there's going to be a couple things. First, the first row is going to be the headers. This will be exactly the same headers that are in the template that you download on the screen that I showed you earlier. But what we've done here is put a little bit more information on exactly what's the content that needs to go in each of those columns and how you should load it and format it, and a few other basic rules. So, for example, the NPI contains the physician NPI. So, if you've got a few hundred encounters or a few thousand encounters across multiple physicians, each encounter, of course, is going to have a physician. The clinic TIN is going to be everybody. There's a column here, column C, measure title. You can leave that one blank. I'm going to skip over your unique identifier. I'll come back to that in a minute. The patient UUID is the patient ID from your system. It might be a medical record number or whatever unique number that you use to identify a patient file. Then there's the patient date of birth and the encounter date. These should both be in the format of 0101 slash 2025. So the data format in Excel, that data format will be called short date. The gender will be M or F. CPT codes will include all of the CPT codes for a given encounter. And if you're almost always going to have multiple CPT codes associated with a specific encounter, including the G codes that you use to identify met or not met or excluded. And you can separate those CPT codes with a semicolon. Same thing with ICD-10 codes. All the diagnosis codes that are associated with specific encounter should be listed in this cell, and if there are multiples, there probably will be separate with semicolon. If you have modifiers associated, load those here. We have a new feature this year. If you care to, and I think most of you will not, but if you care to, you can actually upload physician notes from your EHR into Macromonitor, and we'll be able to incorporate that, and you'll be able to look at the physician notes associated with an encounter if you want to identify or do corrections. The file ID you leave blank. The system will populate that, patient age, and then there's another called criteria, which you leave blank as well. So that's the description of the individual columns for the registry data. I said that there's one field I was going to come back to, and this one is a little bit different because it's a calculation you're going to have to make, or your billing company is going to have to make, or someone's going to have to make when they create the file. And it's the end result will be a unique identifier that is a combination of three things that create a unique encounter. And that unique identifier is going to be the elements are the NPI, identifying the physician, the patient UUID, identifying the patient, and the encounter date to identify obviously the date with an encounter. And that's what is used to create a unique encounter for purposes of quality measuring. Now, let me pop in some numbers here and show you how that formula works. And by the way, if you need a little extra help with this, please set up a Zoom meeting and I'll do it. Don't spend a lot of time trying to manually create this. It should be a very simple formula you create once and copy down the list of all encounters. I'm going to start with, we're going to pretend we've got a row here that has an NPI. And we've got a patient UUID. We've got an encounter date. So that's the way each row is going to look in your each row is going to look in your spreadsheet. And what you'll do to create this field is it's a formula. I'm going to type the formula out. It's equal concatenate, open paren, and you click on the first field column, and then you put in quotes the underscore character column field two, comma, in quotes, the underscore character, comma, and counter date. And then you close paren. And you see what the system will do is it'll calculate that um, it'll calculate that unique identifier. And then you just take that formula and copy it and paste it all the way down to the end of all of your encounters. Now, once you've done that, you're not quite done because the spreadsheet is left with a formula from the value. So you're going to do a copy of the formula, Control C to copy that formula, and you're going to mix it up to the top, and you're going to paste, and you're going to click the 1, 2, 3. You're going to paste, and what that does, it converts that value from a formula into an actual value. Again, if you need help with this, schedule a Zoom call. If you want your tech people to chat with us about how to do it, they'll have some techniques for doing that as well. But I wanted to make sure that you had a sense of how to do of how to create that unique identifier. Now, there's a couple of basic rules that you want to follow. You can certainly download a copy of this template without the instructions on the page that I showed a little while ago on the encounter data / upload new file dialog. That'll be the nice clean version that doesn't have all this different help text. You can use the template just the way we've got it written here. It's just you'll have to, when you're ready to start loading your data, you'll need to delete all of these rows and clean it out, leave nothing but the top row. The other thing you'll have to do is be sure and save the file as a CSV rather than an Excel file. The other basic rule is one encounter per row, and each encounter has all of the codes related to that encounter. So it could be all of the CPT and ICD-10 codes. If an individual encounter is applicable for multiple different quality measures, and that's quite likely, include the G codes for all of the quality measures on the same row. Don't break an encounter into multiple rows for different measures. That'll confuse the system and give us all some troubles. And kind of the last thing is the column names and sequences must be exactly as represented here. And that should be about it. Yeah, I hope that was useful in terms of helping you to understand how to go about uploading data to the Macromonitor from your raw data from the raw encounter data that you've created through your combination of your billing systems or maybe your billing company or codes you've entered on your face sheets. Now, before we leave, though, there's one new topic or one other topic that I want to share with you, and that is if you're a registry, sometimes it can be one of the biggest challenges is in understanding what are all of the requirements of each measure. In other words, what are the CPT and ICD-10 that cause an encounter to be included in a measure? Once you've identified a measure that you're going to that you're going to use, what are the possible G codes that you use, and what are the conditions defining those G codes for met and not met, and exceptions and exclusions. So we built a tool into Macromonitor that I think you're going to find to be very helpful in doing that. Let's take a minute and take a look at that tool before we close out the session. Now, when you're in Macromonitor, when you first log in, you'll come to the dashboard, and we already talked about how going to the encounter data. Remember, this will change later on to say registry data, but going to this link to be able to actually upload your content. Once the content's uploaded, you go to the quality link, and within the quality link, you look at 10 CQM details to see what your scores look like. But the other issue that I want to address is how do I know for each measure that I'm responsible for, what are the things that cause an encounter to fall within the measure? And once I've identified a measure and then an encounter has been within the measure, what are the codes that I need to apply to make sure that the measure is correctly accounted for? And for that, you want to click on this link that says Measure Atlas. Now, within the measure atlas, you're going to see a list of all of the measures that CMS that CMS offers, and they're going to be listed here numerically. Let's and you'll be able to look each of those up to find out what are those rules. So let's pretend that we're going to be looking up measure 130, documentation of current meds. There, you'll notice that there's a link here, and you look under the column that says registry, and you're going to click this link for registry. And what that does, you'll see that it brings up spec sheet for the individual measure. Now you can read through all of you want on the spec sheet, but notice it's about 8 pages long. I'm going to make it simple on you. You don't need to read all 8 pages. Essentially, the two pieces that you need are in order to understand which of your encounters are included in a denominator, take a look at this denominator section, and the denominator section will always have the rule. So in this case, it says any patient, regardless of age, presents with one of the, or who's represented with one of these CPT codes. And in the case of this particular measure, it's simple. It's all patients, regardless of age, and CPT codes. If the measure requires patients of a certain age, it'll say that here. If the measure requires a combination of CPT codes or CPT and diagnosis, that'll be defined here in the denominator section, always structured that way. Once you've identified an encounter as relevant, you're going to scroll down to the numerator section. Now you can read this text if you want. That provides some background, but the actual rule itself is in this part right here. It says numerator options, and for the most part, there's going to be three options. Option number one, what do we have to do, or what's the code that we insert into our file to identify that we've met the conditions of the specific measure. So in this case, it would be G 8427 says performance was met on the documentation of current meds in the clinical record. So if you read through this and you determine that you've met that you've met that set of criteria, you'll code the encounter with G8427. There are some cases where you could say I didn't meet it, but CMS gives us options, or the measure stewards give us options to say this encounter can be accepted or excluded. And if you meet those, you'll code in a G8430. And then for the balance, those where you did not meet, you code a G8428. Now, before I leave this page, there's one important thing. And that is that in the registry system, you're going to be required to enter one of those codes for every encounter that qualifies for a given for a given measure. In Macromonitor, now if you should miss a couple, then don't worry, because there's a tool in Macromonitor where you'll be able to download a list of those that are called data completeness not met. What data completeness not met tells us is that there were encounters that fell within the denominator criteria for which you did not affix a G code. And we'll be able to give you that report, turn that report around. You'll be able to go back and look up and find out whether you actually met, excluded, or not met the specific measure. So the rule here is each encounter that's relevant to a measure, one of the three measures you need to report for WIPA, has to have at least one of the valid codes. In the case of measure 130, there's only three. Some of the other measures may have 4 or 5 different codes, depending on different conditions for met or different exception conditions. In order to understand what those conditions are, you go into Macromonitor, look up the measure, pull down pull down the spec and read that spec section. And that'll make sure that you stay rock solid in terms of having all of the correct data to report. And then, as I say later on, we'll help you to understand if there are some that you miss. We'll be able to give you a turnaround report to help identify those that got missed. So that should be the full set of things that you need to be aware of for reporting registry data through the IPA for 2025. A little different than 2024. Last year, remember, there was a separate portal that you had to load data into, and you know and then from there we would let you know whether or not it processed correctly. In the new system in Macromonitor, you'll see that processing status and whether it's processed correctly or not. Um, Usually, Macromonitor will give you um, if something did not process, it'll give you an indication of what it is and why it didn't. If you need help with that, give me a call or schedule it. Preferably use the calendar widget in Macromonitor, schedule a Zoom call, and we'll get together as soon as we can and get things buttoned up for you. Thanks.